continuing through our series this morning through the book of John. And I have a little bit of a prop this morning. So we'll grab this. All right. So who knows who Jeff Foxworthy is? Yeah, all right. So Jeff Foxworthy has a couple of skits that are really, really well known. There's a couple of them that he does that are hilarious, but his probably most well known is You Might Be a Redneck. All right. So we are going to talk about You Might Be a Great Servant If. But if you don't remember any of the redneck jokes, I thought I'd share them with you this morning. So you might be a redneck if you've spent more on your pickup truck than you have on your education. You might be a redneck if your family tree's a straight line. Nobody get offended, all right? It's all right. Because I know there's some rednecks out here. I come from some, all right? You might be a redneck if the only condiment on the dining room table is the economy-sized bottle of ketchup. You might be a redneck if you have 10 cars in the front yard, but the only thing mobile is your home. That's great, right? It's true. It's so true. Listen, I know some places in PA where there's like, oh man, it's like, do any of those work at all? What are you doing with them all? You might be a redneck, and I can't remember if I've done this or not, but I might have. If you have ever used an ironing board as a buffet table. And you might be a redneck if your child's first words were, "Attention, Kmart shoppers." All right, I'll take this off. I don't need to wear this the whole time. It's actually hot. It's felt. So, we are going to talk about those things, and you can get the point of all of that, because just by me saying that, like, family tree's a straight line, everybody's all, yeah, yep, because they're all marrying their cousins, right? Like, everybody, you go right to it. That's what you do. So, we're going to look at what makes you a great servant, and where we're going to be this morning is in John chapter 3, if you want to turn there, and we're going to be starting in we're going to be starting in verse 22, all right? And we're going to be looking at John the Baptist, all right? And what's your job this morning when I go through this list, just like I just went through, You Might Be a Redneck list, is to look at these things and go, okay, am I a great servant? Do I match up with these things, or do I have work to do? And listen, if you look at it and you're like, boom, that's how I live my life. Great. That's awesome. But if it doesn't match up with you, great. That's awesome, because now you have something to point to, because John the Baptist shows us what it means to be a great servant. So we're going to look at him, and we're going to see how he does it. So starting in John 3, verse 22, then Jesus and his disciples left Jerusalem and went into the Judean countryside. Jesus spent some time with them there, baptizing people. At this time, John the Baptist was baptizing at Anon, near Salim, because there was plenty of water there, and people kept coming to him for baptism. Stop for real quick. I love sometimes, like, just the practicality of the Bible. Like, why was he there? Because there was water there. Like, that's why he was there. I love it. If you ever wonder why he was baptizing where he's at, it's because there was water there, and there's plenty of it for all the people. This shows us there was probably a crowd of people that were being baptized, both by Jesus and by John the Baptist. All right? This was before John was thrown into prison. A debate broke out between John's disciples and a certain Jew over ceremonial cleansing. So John's disciples came to him and said, "Rabbi, the man you met on the other side of the Jordan River, the one who you identified as the Messiah, he is also baptizing people, and everybody is going to him instead of coming to us." John replied, "No one can receive anything unless God gives it from heaven. You yourselves know how plainly I told you I am not the Messiah. I am only here to prepare the way for him. It is the bridegroom who marries the bride, and the bridegroom's friend is simply glad to stand with him and hear his vows. Therefore, I am filled with joy at his success. He must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less." You can see what's happening here, all right? What we've got going on is John the Baptist's ministry has been going on with constant success for over 6 months now, probably somewhere between 7 and 12 months, right around there, okay? That's how long that his ministry has been going on, of preparing the way for the Lord, baptizing people. He was the one that was prophesied about in the Old Testament, the one that is going to come in the wilderness, crying, "Prepare ye the way for the Lord." That was John the Baptist. And his practice of immersing people as they turn from their sinful lives, in some ways resemble some of the ceremonial washings that the Jewish rabbis prescribed for people, but it was different. Nobody else was baptizing before this point. John the Baptist was, that's why he's called John the Baptist. He was the first one baptizing people, all right? And so it was like, he had the market cornered. He was the baptizer. His name was Baptist. John the Baptist. You want which John? The Baptist John. That John. He was the Baptist, all right? And so what you got is you've got this like indignant Jew that comes to her and approaches some of his followers and says, you guys think you got the market corner with repentance and with this like brand new baptism thing that you're doing over here? Well, what about this new guy over here, Jesus? Right? His disciples are baptizing people too, and they're drawing some pretty big crowds, because why would you go to John the Baptist when you got the real thing right there, right? I mean, if I had the choice, I'm going to Jesus over John the Baptist. John the Baptist is great, but I'm going to Jesus, right? So you can understand why people were doing that, all right? But and when they hear this, John the Baptist followers, because it was a big deal to follow a rabbi around. John the Baptist was their rabbi that they followed around. Coming to him like, teacher, like that guy that you baptized, he's now going off and doing it, and he's doing better than you are. And it's an ugly game that we play. We place people on pedestals, rabbis, preachers, Sunday school teachers, you name it. In the church context, we place people in these like, oh, well, this guy, you got to hear him preach. You know what I mean? Or like, man, you know, and we put people on these pedestals, and we take pride in being part of that group, right? To a point where we even encourage rivalry between congregations and within congregations. But I want you to look with me in John chapter 3 here, and we can learn how we can model John the Baptist's example of servitude, because his response to this is right on. Like it's right where it needs to be. These are the last recorded words of John the Baptist, all right? And they betray the sterling quality of his character. That same character that caused Jesus to say, among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Now, Jesus is God, and Jesus can't lie. So Jesus said, among those born of women, Adam was not, Jesus was not. Everybody from Adam to Jesus at that point, nobody was greater than John the Baptist. Why would he say that? It's because of John the Baptist's heart, and it's because of his heart of servanthood. That's what he says. There's none greater than him. John the Baptist was great because he was a servant, a great servant to Jesus. He wasn't great because of some specific thing he did, or because he always made it to church on time, or he was the first one to volunteer for something. It was because he was a great servant. All right? His first response we see in verse 27. To this John replied, a man can receive only what is given him from heaven. So you might be a great servant if you acknowledge your gifts are from God. All right? You realize that they are not your gifts given for your fulfillment, but they are God's gifts given for you to use for him. All right, that is what your gifts are for. And what this does is it keeps you from becoming proud of yourself, because you realize that anything you're able to do, any good part about you, is really God's doing and God's blessing. Because if you actually look at yourself, you are dirty and rotten and horrible apart from him. All right, he is what makes you clean. He is what makes you good. All right. You aren't threatened when somebody else begins to receive recognition. Woo! This happens in the church. Oh, I want to serve, but I want to serve there. Doing that right there on those drums. That's where I want to serve. And if I'm not allowed to because Tom's drumming, then I ain't serving. Man. Got super quiet real fast here. Listen. We can't be threatened because somebody else begins to see recognition, or because somebody else is utilizing their gifts, or because God is blessing somebody else in their life. All right, we see someone, I don't understand. Why is this guy, he comes to church, I go to Justice, in fact, I'm there more than him. I go to Sunday school and he doesn't, but God's blessing him and he's not blessing me. Right? That's where we get to. If you take it out of there and you go, okay, everything I've been given is a gift from God, and I have no right to expect any more or less than what I have been given, then you're golden. Then you don't have to worry about it. Then you can be at peace if God sees fit to remove those gifts or abilities, because he can do that too. They're his gifts. They're his abilities to be used for him. And I'm telling you right now, real quick, the Bible clearly states that if you are not using your gifts and talents for him, he'll take them away. Straight up. That's what it says that it'll do. So if you ever wonder at the success that God gives you when you're doing something for him, do not look in the mirror. Don't do it. Because every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like the shifting shadows. You might be a great servant if you acknowledge your gifts are from God. You might be a great servant. This is verses 28 to 29 in what we read. If you see yourself as a friend of the groom, the best man. So John the Baptist says, you yourselves can testify that I am not the Christ, but am sent ahead of him. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him, and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine, and it is now complete. That was John's response. John the Baptist could have talked about a lot of stuff. He could have been like, well, Jesus said I'm the greatest. Like, don't go to him, come to me. Like, he said I'm the greatest. He said I'm the greatest. Come to me. I baptized him first. Come to the original. Right? Like, he could have done that. He could have seen himself as in competition, but he wasn't. He didn't see himself that way. He saw himself as a friend of the groom, as the best man. He could have been like, well, like, I mean, it's basically saying I'm his cousin. Like, who pulled the family card, right? Like, he's my cousin. He could have pulled it that way. He saw himself as a friend of the groom. The friend of the groom played an important role in the first century Jewish wedding. He negotiated on behalf of the prospective groom and his father with a representative of the bride's father. So you had the groom had a representative that was his best man, okay? That's a guy who's going to watch his back. He's going to go negotiate with the representative for the bride's father, and they're going to come together and go, nah, he needs to have this. Nah, he ain't getting that. He's getting this, right? Because there had to be a price paid, a mahar, right? That's what it's called. It was a bride price to pay because the father of the bride was losing a worker in his household. All right? So there had to be a compensation paid to the bride's family because they'd be losing her. And a dowry had to be paid to the bride's father. In other words, you wanted somebody who had your back going into them negotiations. You did not want somebody going in there going, you can ask for more than that, he's got it. No, you wanted somebody who was going to represent your best interests. All right, marriage, we don't see it this way nowadays, right? Because, or whatever, but like it was a legally binding thing. And it still was. So like think of it as like almost like he was there on your behalf like your attorney would, right? To get you the best he could get you. Right? Think of it like a tax attorney or whatever. That was it. And listen, it was his joy to do it. Like he was excited and he'd go around telling people like, dude, you want me as your best man. Like, you see what I got for Jesus? Right? You see what I got for him? Or you see what I got for Andrew over here? You see what I got for John over here? Like, I'm a great best man. But what that meant was he did not see Jesus as just his CEO. He did not see Jesus as his boss, that if I don't do this exactly the way that he says, I'll lose my job type of attitude. Jesus was his honored friend that he was privileged to serve. He wasn't worried about breaking some contract. I got this gift or I got this blessing, but if I don't do this exactly the way I'm supposed to, it'll go away. Or the other way, listen, we treat church like a contract, just like what I talked about earlier. Oh, I'm going to come to church, and I've been there, and I've been there, and I've been there, and I've been there. Where's the blessing? Why aren't my finances growing? Maybe it's because your heart's not in the right place, because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. The reason isn't to come to church and to try to get closer to God, to try to attain something. The reason to come to church and try to get closer to God is because you have an intimate relationship with God, with Jesus Christ. That's why you come here. You come here to worship. You come here to learn more about him. That's what I'm teaching you right now, so that you can get closer and closer and closer to him. You do not come here because if you don't, you won't get a blessing. That's not why. You don't come here because you want to come here because you want people to notice who you are, or to see you, or to hear you, or to have your voice be the one that's heard. You're here to listen to God's voice. That's what you're here to listen to this morning. All right? And listen, the reason I think why a lot of Christians go around looking like they've been baptized in vinegar is because they don't think they're getting what they're supposed to out of their contract. I got news for them. It's not a contract. It is not a contract. It is a relationship. All right? You're not here just to keep your end of a business obligation. And too many people look at it that way for personal gain. You have a genuine, intimate relationship with him if you're a great servant. The word used here for friend is the word for brotherly love. That is what motivates the great service for Jesus. A genuine, intimate relationship with him. And if you need some motivation to serve Jesus this morning or to wake up, it's because you're searching for that genuine, intimate relationship with him. That's what makes you a great servant. You see yourself as an intimate friend of the groom. And then you find your joy in the groom's joy. Verse 29. All right, the friend accompanied the groom on his wedding day. And once the groom was all dressed up, okay, he would walk to his bride's house. From there, they would walk back to their new home together for several days of feasting with their friends. The best man did not follow the groom during this. The best man stayed and waited and watched for him. That's what the best man did. He stayed and waited and watched it. He would stand and wait for the groom to return with his bride and officially begin the wedding feast. And when the groom returned with his bride, the party began. It was a happy time. The best man was standing there waiting, like everybody's inside, like all of a sudden, here he is, here they come, all right, everybody get out of here right now, come on, we're excited. You're excited. His joy was in the groom's joy. The best man's not getting anything out of this. His friend is, his best friend is getting this out of it. You're not worried about being the one that's front and center. Every wedding I've been to, the best man stands there. Groom stands here, facing this way. The bride stands there. He's behind the groom. He's off to the side. He's not front and center. That's not your motivation for being the best man. Your motivation is the groom. When everybody else is looking at the bride, you're looking at the groom. That's the best man. You're the one that's there talking to him. You're his confidant. You know? He's the one talking, I don't know, should I do this? Should I not? Like, are you sure? Right? Like, every best man should ask, are you sure? Before they let them go through with this, right? Like, are you sure? Have you said that? Have you prayed? Have you done that? Did you have marriage counseling? Did you do this? Like, that should be the job of the best man, because your job is to look out for the groom. That is your job as a best man. You look to the groom, not the bride. It's the groom's job to look to the bride. I will never forget when my bride appeared at the end of the aisle. I had a huge smile on my face. I could not help myself. There were a lot of people happy for me there for a lot of different reasons that day, but I was happy that I was taking Ashley, okay? I was the groom. I was taking the bride, and nobody else was, okay? It was me. I'd fight, all right? I was. The groom's joy comes because of the bride. She belongs to him. Every wedding that I've ever been at, once the bride arrives, if the best man has the right attitude, his joy is because the groom is joyful. He's not looking to the bride. He is looking to the groom. We, church, are the bride of Christ. Okay, so why are we looking to people for their acceptance when we're up here doing something, when we're serving? When we're serving, why is our motivation to serve how many people will notice us? Why is our motivation to serve whether or not somebody says, oh, you did a great job this Sunday? Why is that our motivation to serve? We should not be looking to the bride, to the congregation. We're looking to the groom. We look to Christ. We don't get jealous. We don't get angry because somebody else is doing something, the bride is noticing it. We look to the groom. He is the one that we're there to serve. We are John the Baptist said it perfectly. I hope I get to be wise enough one day that when somebody says something, I respond in the way that John the Baptist responded. In the way of just like, he didn't even answer the question. He didn't at all. Every good and perfect thing comes from God. Like, that's what he said. He didn't even answer like, wow, what's happening over here? Why didn't you address it? He just said, all he did was point out the proper place. Everything has a hierarchy and everything has a priority. Okay? And Jesus is at your top. And he is the reason why you serve. It is not because somebody's going to hear you sing or see what you did or say you're such a great person or any of those type of things. It has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with a output towards, this is why I do it, because of what you have done for me. It is an attitude of gratitude. It is an I can't help but do this because of everything that you've done for me. I had somebody one time and I was like, oh man, thank you so much. And we will. Recognition is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, church. Don't hear that. Don't thank your servants. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they shouldn't be doing it for it. So what I'm saying to you is go ahead, absolutely. I walked up to one, I was like, oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You've been helping out, and I love it, and stuff like that. Guy looked at me, he turned to me, and he goes, everything he's done for me, it's the least I could do. That's the heart. That's the attitude. Like that is the response, and that is the reason why. We are not supposed to just come here and sit down in church and just consume everything God has for us. We are supposed to be looking for ways to give it back. That is what we are supposed to be doing. And we're not supposed to be getting jealous or angry at anybody else because they're getting some sort of recognition or anything that we're not getting. And the reason behind that is because you might be a great servant if you have wisdom enough to see His plan come together. You have wisdom enough to see His plan come together. John 15:15 says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. Our friendship with the Master means that we are more than just servants. He has let us in on His plan. And because He has let us in on what His plan is, you see yourself as part of that plan. You don't need to see yourself as the plan. Okay, you're not one big, huge gear that makes everything turn, and without you, it would all fall apart. That's not how it works. You are a small piece, a small cog in the wheel, in the great and perfect thing that He is doing. And you see yourself in that, when you put yourself in that proper place, then you will know what true servanthood means. Okay? He lets us know what His business is all about. A great servant is one who recognizes God's plan is at work and is willing to work towards that plan. That's what a great servant is. That's what John the Baptist is saying. I love it when a plan comes together. All right? It was all part of God's plan. That He would baptize Jesus, that Jesus would go baptize the world. Like that's the plan. That was the plan. John the Baptist knew his role in it. It was small. It was minuscule. But it's huge, and he'll be remembered forever for it, right? But in this time, everybody around him was like, what's going on over here? Like, this other guy's taking all the credit. It's because he's Jesus. That's fine, right? That's John the Baptist. But same way with us. We look around and we go, well, this guy over here he's getting all the recognition. Every time Kevin preaches, somebody tells me he does a great job. How come they don't tell me? That's not true. I'm just pointing it out. It's totally hypothetical. He does do a great job every time. And our response should be, yeah, it's because he's awesome and he's doing something for the Lord. Praise God. Like somebody doing something over here for the Lord. And people are having their life changed because of what they're doing. Praise God. Not wish it was me. Why can't I? Well, I mean, I do the same thing. Well, how come this isn't? You're willing to go, hey, the only reason they were able to do that is because A, B, C. Listen, you're a piece of the alphabet. Think of it that way. 26 letters. You're one little piece. You got to have all the ones before it, and you got to have all the ones after it. All right, what you're doing is not the whole. We used to have a saying in the military, okay? In the military, I was in the Army, and that every single part of the military is geared towards one thing, killing the enemy. Everything. Doesn't matter what you do. I'm like, well, what about the cook? Yeah, the cook feeds the men that repair the firearms, that go to the soldiers, that go in battle, that kill the enemy. Well, what about the truck drivers? Well, the truck drivers carry the men that carry the weapons. That go. Do you understand? No one part is greater, because if you lose one part of that supply chain, it breaks down. And that's the way that it works. And here we got, how many people we got started? We got 40, 30, a bunch of people, okay? You or any one of those people is not the linchpin that it all falls apart if they pull out. Okay, because it takes the 25 above and the 25 after. It to actually make it happen and actually make it work. Because you can take that one person out, they don't still roll. All right, it's still going to happen. All right, it's still going to happen. The enemy's still going to die. All right, like that's what's going to happen. You think more about his plan than your plan. If you're a great servant. When you have wisdom to see his plan come together, it's not, well, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. Like you get out of that contractual mindset, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and it's going to be step A, step B, step C, step D, pastor of megachurch. That's not how it works. You just be happy to be a part of anything that he's doing, which is continually, God's plan for the world is to continually redeem his creation back to him. That's it. And if you could be a small piece of any part of that, that's amazing and that's awesome. You don't know what your impact is going to have on somebody just by being like, well, how can I be a part of that if I'm greeting? Are you kidding me? How can I be a part of that if I'm in the kids' room? Are you kidding me? Really? Like there's people that can't come because they're like, oh man, like I can't trust these people with my kids. Not us here, I'm saying. But if we have a good solid kids team and they know they can trust you, they can sit in here and they can be at ease and they can know that their kids are going to be cared for. And they can get blessed. They could make a life-changing decision that changes the trajectory for that entire family. But if you didn't have a kids ministry, they'd have never sat down. They wouldn't have been here for it. Same with the greeting ministry, man. I've walked into some places. Who knows? I mean, come on. I've walked into some places and you're like, hey. Like that's it. Not just churches. I'm saying anywhere. Like I have actually like boycott restaurants because I'm like, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. I'm like, really? Like you can't even say you're welcome? Nope. Not coming back to you again. Not doing it. You can ask my wife 100%. I'm like, yeah, I just can't believe it. It's so easy to do. You can change somebody's complete and total response to Christ that morning based on your attitude at the greeter door. Because they come in and be like, oh man, it's just, I feel so welcomed. I feel so at peace. I feel so at ease here. Then all of a sudden, the Spirit starts to move in them. But listen, the Spirit has a hard time moving when we're like this. And if they feel like, well, nobody said hi to me. Well, nobody did this for me. Nobody welcomed me. Is this even like a place I want to be? It has a hard time for the Spirit to move. So guess what you do as greeters? You get people to open their hands up and be ready to actually receive what's happening. And the way that you do that is just by softening their hearts. So every single part is pivotal. You just might not see it because you're standing there like, all I'm doing is holding the door. Listen, hold that door. Like the person that walks in that door is going to receive Jesus today. Watch those kids like their parents are going to receive Jesus. Watch those kids like what you're teaching them is going to impact them and they're going to remember it and they're going to receive Jesus. You understand? Like that is where we should be because we're more worried about his plan than our plan. And then you get to share in the joy. Then you get to be joyous. Because what brings you more joy than anything is that guy accepted the Lord today. That's what brings you the joy, not, oh, well, Dwayne said I did great. Who cares what Dwayne thinks? That guy accepted Jesus today. That's what matters. That's what gives you your joy. Then you can share in the joy of being a part of his plan. There's an article by a preacher in Servant Magazine. I'm going to read it straight off of here for you guys today because I thought it was crazy. Because you look at this and it's like, it's really hard to get people to understand this. Because people will sit there and be like, this church isn't meeting my needs. Right? So listen, I was in the supermarket the other day and a lady came down the aisle whom I could barely see over the top of her groceries. I got somewhat frightened because she seemed to be heading straight for me. Ever have people like that? It's like, man, can she even see me? You're in the grocery store, it turns into NASCAR. All right? She screeched to a halt within a few feet from me, peered over her load, wagged her finger, and went, I left your church. I left it. So I said, well, if it's my church, I'm glad you left, because I don't want to be there either. I want to have responses like that to people, right? Like, because it shouldn't be. It isn't his church, right? It's God's church. She goes, don't you want to know why I left? He goes, no, but I feel like you're going to tell me, so go ahead. She goes, you weren't meeting my needs. I answered, I don't even recollect ever seeing you before, let alone talking to you, let alone knowing what your needs are. Did you ever tell anyone specifically what your needs were? She said, no, I don't think so. She started mumbling a little bit. So raised another question. Can you tell me, if we have 500 people sitting in that church, all with your attitude, how are anyone's needs going to be met? How am I supposed to meet the needs of every single person that's in there? But if you reserve to have the right to have that attitude, then you have to give everybody the freedom to have that attitude. And if everybody has that attitude, who on earth is going to do all the needing? Or all the need meeting? Here's the way it'll work. When people stop sitting in the pew saying they're not meeting my needs and start saying whose needs can I meet, then needs will be met. When the servant spirit flourishes in a congregation, then they minister to each other as unto the Lord. That's the master's plan for his people. Great servants recognize how God's plan works, and they appreciate when it all comes together. All right? Regardless of who has a hand in it coming together. They appreciate when someone comes forward to be baptized. When someone grows in Christ, when someone shows strength. When homes start to believe in the Lord. When numbers increase. That all is a byproduct of that. And they understand why those things happen. It happens because of people who are willing to serve. Because I can't do it by myself. Kevin can't do it by himself. And we're not meant to do it by ourselves. It's not how it works. You might be a great servant if you are willing to become less so that he can become more. If Jesus had called people to be kings and celebrities and national heroes, he probably would have had a larger following faster. Because who isn't interested in being popular and well-liked? Who wouldn't like for everyone to see you smile and wave and to call you by name? John the Baptist reflected on his position in God's plan and said it this way. He must become greater, I must become less. It's binding. It has to be this way. Jesus' popularity must grow. The name of Jesus must become more important to people than my name. The news about him has to spread. I have to shrink. I have to decrease. I have to blend into the background. His image is more important than your image. How you are viewed by everyone matters very little. How he is viewed matters a whole lot. I don't need people to believe me. I need people to believe God. I don't need people to believe in me. I don't need people to follow me. I need people to believe in Jesus. I need people to follow Jesus. Does that make sense? It's the same for each and every single one of you. Your image doesn't matter. His does. Point to him. And that's why you have the greatest response ever. If somebody walks up to you and is like, oh, you're serving the church and you're doing that? Yeah, I'm not perfect. He is. Done. Done. I saw you at the bar last week. Yeah, you're right. I'm not perfect. He is. I saw you smoking. You're right. I'm not perfect. He is. Well, you cussed. You're right. I'm not perfect. He is. You got mad at your kids. You're right. I'm not perfect. He is. I try every day and I fail every day. And you're going to do the same thing. Your image doesn't matter. Paul boasted in his weaknesses because it pointed to Christ. What we look like and how people perceive us doesn't matter at all. Couldn't care less at all. His image is more important than your image. And you must be willing to sacrifice. There are plenty of people who think they'd like to do something really, really key for the Lord's work. Something that people will note and remember. Something that will make a name for them. Would the call to Jesus seem attractive if we were asked to become nothing for him? What if we were called by God to share the glory of the heroes of the faith listed in Hebrews 11, verses 35 to 38? But others were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. They placed their hope in a better life after the resurrection. Some were jeered at and their backs were cut open with whips. Others were chained in prison. Some died by stoning. Some were sawed in half. Others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. They were too good for this world, wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. All these people earned a good reputation because of their faith, yet none of them received all that God had promised. For God had something better in mind for us, so that they would not reach perfection without us. I remember in high school, I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to make a mark. I wanted to be somebody great. I wanted to be significant. Stephen was somebody in the Bible who was significant. Stephen made a name for himself. What'd he do? Yell it. He died. That's why you know his name. It's the only reason you know his name. It's because he died. Because he was the first person to die for Jesus. Because he showed grace and forgiveness towards the people who were stoning him to death. In 1972, a 2-year-old Chinese boy, Hu Zhenchuan, fell from a table and went into a coma. When he woke up after 6 days, he was not able to talk or move. Like any parent, his mother was terribly distressed. Yet her distress was multiplied by the fact that she could not afford to place him in a nursing home. Instead, she has cared for him herself, and her care has shown the unfathomable depth of the mother's love. You see, because he is unable to move, he's likely to get terrible bed sores. So for the past 30 years, his mother has done the unbelievable. She has carried her son on her back. As of May 22, Lu Wan, that's the mother's name, was 65 years old and weighed 40 kilograms. Her son, now a grown man, weighs more than twice her weight at 82 kilograms. And on many occasions, Lu has fallen and fractured bones while carrying her son, yet she continues to carry him. And when asked how she can do it, her reply is simple. He ain't heavy. He's my son. How would you and I react, I wonder, if we pointed to a basin of water and asked us to wash the calloused feet of a bent and wrinkled old woman day after day, month after month, in a room where nobody saw and nobody knew? If that's what God asked you to do, how would you respond? I ain't doing that. Be honest with yourself, because that's what you'd say. I ain't doing that. We might be a great servant if we were willing to become less for Jesus. Last story. In the late afternoon in Korea, a missionary doctor emerged from the operating room, tired, beads of perspiration on his forehead. His hands trembled with fatigue. He was asked by an onlooker how much he would have received for such a delicate operation in America. Perhaps $2,000 to $5,000, he replied. Then came the question, how much will you receive from this Korean woman? Nothing but her gratitude and the master's smile. Would you be satisfied with that kind of pay? Because that kind of pay, the gratitude is the currency. It goes both ways. The gratitude from somebody else and the gratitude of you towards Christ. You have gratitude for what he's given to you, so you serve in. Somebody else has gratitude for what you've done, so they turn and serve. It's just this constant gears spinning together. Gratitude is the currency that makes it keep going. And your gratitude in what Jesus has done for you is what starts that rolling. It's what starts it. There's the 4 G's of the gospel. If you look at it, it's guilt, grace, gratitude, glorification. We're in the gratitude stage right now. Anybody here that has received Christ is in the gratitude stage. The guilt of the law points us to the grace of Christ. The gratitude for what he's done for us is why we do what we do. And then one day we'll be in glory. Guilt, grace, gratitude, glory. You're in gratitude right now. Act like it. Act like you're grateful for what he's done for you. You want to glorify God this morning? There's only one way to true greatness, and that is true servanthood. And John the Baptist has showed us what a true great servant actually looks like. If I can have the worship team come up, we're going to pray this morning.